Well, I really appreciate being able to speak to you in this format, and I will really appreciate your attention as I try to talk about really an issue of communication. So the title of my talk, as you know, is "Everyone Loves a Good Story, Even Policymakers." And I want to just brainstorm with you on some things that have been on my mind for the last several months, particularly as I've worked with an organization known as Compass and also with the Leopold Leadership Program. And the whole idea of both of those organizations is to help scientists and resource managers to communicate better with policymakers and with the media and, of course, with the public. And I think given the importance of coastal zone management and the oceans now in terms of societal problems that we are helping to solve, this is a really important topic for us to think about and brainstorm on. So I appreciate the opportunity to go through some ideas with you as practitioners and researchers to help us think about stepping out of our ivory towers or our ivory cubicles, if you will, to reach out towards these other audiences. So I'm going to start with this cartoon from the New Yorker. And I have been teased about this cartoon over the many years. For those of you who know me and my specialty, I have worked for many years on mapping the ocean floor. And this, in the caption of this particular cartoon, these ladies are sitting around at tea time, and one of them is telling the other, I don't know why I don't care about the bottom of the ocean, but I don't. And we could insert in that little bit of dialogue, I don't know why I don't care about science, or I don't know why I don't know as much about GIS, but I don't. So I think the cartoon is a nice metaphor for how we can be much better in terms of communicating what we do, communicating our science beyond our own communities to, again, decision makers or policy makers. And we are gathered here at this conference, I think, to talk about these issues, particularly in terms of using our tools beyond just spatial analysis and mapping. So let me take a few minutes just to set this up. So we are, I believe, in the age of science. And this is a graphic that tries to illustrate the point of a very important book that was published recently by Sean Otto that you might want to check out in your spare time. But the idea is that in the next 40 years, we're going to be generating more scientific knowledge, more scientific insight than in the past 400 years. So this really is the age of science. As we know, it's the age of technology. There are all kinds of fantastic innovations that are going to and are changing the way that we live, the way that we think, the way that we interact with each other. The interesting thing about this is that in this age of science and technology, where we have our governments who need to lead us and make decisions and enable us in this, it's an interesting fact that, and I'll just use this figure from the United States, that less than 2% of our Congress has any kind of science background or training. Now, this is not a criticism of our congressmen, but it's just, I think, a wake-up call for us in terms of when we speak to them or speak to policymakers, we really are speaking to a different audience, and we need to understand where they're coming from accordingly, and craft our messages, craft our maps while keeping them accurate, while keeping them truthful, making them more communicative to this other and important audience. Now, I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of why this is important, because this slide talks about the long-standing challenges that are before us that many of us are involved in. And you can see on the slide that, of course, climate change vulnerability and adaptation is a huge one. Biodiversity response, trying to prevent the loss and fragmentation of habitats, disaster response, healthcare, pollution and waste management, all of the other ones that you can read on the slide. All of these societal challenges, long-standing societal challenges, are underpinned by science. And so I think this is really going to be important for us to not stand on the sidelines in terms of just doing our own little science projects or even being involved in our own little resource management silos, but to really think about stepping out in terms of how we can participate in helping to communicate science in a way that helps further to solve these challenges. So in this next slide, what you're looking at is a story that we, in our community, we're all familiar with this. This is the story of how the atmosphere has been warming up due to the buildup of greenhouse gases, and the ocean has responded to that. So the ocean has warmed up over a long period of time, and what you're looking at on the top level are some snapshots in time of sea surface temperature that, again, are familiar to all of us from the early 1900s until near the present. In the middle of the diagram, you're looking at the curve that shows how the sea surface temperatures have been warming over these years. But one of the things that has been quite an eye-opener as we continue to monitor the oceans in response to atmospheric warming, and this is thanks to some of the work that has been done by many oceanographic institutes, many coastal research institutes, and then also by a new startup known as Marine Explorer, is that we now have very good evidence that the oceans are warming, not only at the surface, but down to a depth as deep as 700 meters. So that's what you see in the bottom of the slide. So this really is, I think, an example of how we should be communicating this important information to our policymakers, and many of us are trying to do this. This figure that you're looking at appeared in Scientific American, so I think it's very good that it appeared in that more general publication that goes out to policymakers and to the public. You may have also heard the important news that occurred on May 9th, where the daily mean concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide levels finally passed the 400 parts per million level as recorded at the Mauna Loa Observatory. And this has been independently verified by both NOAA and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So this is, I don't know how much you heard about it where you live, but this is really an important scientific event that, again, we need to be communicating. I was recently listening to David Yarnold, who is the CEO and president of the Audubon Society, and he made the very good analogy that something like this, it's like taking your own blood pressure and seeing that your blood pressure is exceedingly high and knowing that you cannot lie to yourself anymore about your physical condition, and you have to do something to help yourself. So I think this occurrence, this measurement of the 400 ppm on May 9th is like that. Anyway, I just wanted to give you an example, a scientific example. So now we're looking at a slide that talks about, happily, science is really being driven by societal needs. It's not just a matter of trying to understand your own species of fish or doing your own isolated ivory tower scientific project, or even focusing on your own little protected area or coastal zone that you're trying to manage. I think there is a paradigm shift that's occurring for those of us who are practitioners and researchers, where science is being driven by several societal pressures, if you will, societal inspirations. And so on the left side of this figure, of this diagram, what I'm trying to show is that, of course, we're after increasing the fundamental understanding of the Earth and how the Earth works through both basic and applied science. But there are also other drivers, such as promoting economic vitality in our nation, protecting life and property. And for those of us who work in the oceans and the coastal zones, this is a natural tie to tsunamis, coastal storms, and so forth. And many of us are involved in enabling the stewardship of the environment through various conservation measures. So science is being driven by these very important factors. On the right side of the diagram, science, I think, is being recast from not only trying to understand how the Earth works, but also how the Earth should look, given how big of an impact we have on the Earth. How the Earth should look is really an issue of design, how we're able to do coastal engineering, for instance, how we're able to geo-design marine protected areas and so forth. And then also how we should look at the Earth. And this is with regard to our ability to observe the Earth at various scales, at various time slices. It has a lot to do with observation, with modeling of data, with so many of the things that we know and understand in geographic information science. Something else that's changing, that in addition to the science that we do and why we do the science, or why the reach of our resource management, is our governments are changing as well. So this particular diagram tries to summarize how our national governments are changing. And I won't go through all of the various parts of the diagram for you. You can read all of the words here, but what we've tried to do here is to summarize some of the global trends that are affecting how governments are trying to solve various problems. There are policy initiatives that are taking place, and a lot of these have to do with dealing with budgets that are shrinking or disappearing. So there's a focus on efficiency. There's a focus on openness and transparency. This also lends to the data trends that we're seeing in governments, particularly with open data initiatives in governments across the world. And this would be at the national level or the federal level, but also the state and regional level and local levels. We all know, and we will be talking about, you will be talking about at your conference, all of the online services, shared data initiatives, and so forth. And this, of course, is tied to the computing trends as well. Cloud, leveraging investments, data centers, and how we work with our current situation with those data centers. So as we are thinking about how things are changing, but also, again, who we are and who our audience is, I wanted to show this diagram that tries to illustrate how, and I'm using here one example of a GI scientist or geographic information scientist, how we tend to communicate what it is that we do or what it is that we've accomplished, perhaps from a study that we've just done or a long-term GIS analysis that we have published as a paper or as a technical report. And if you look at the pyramid here, you'll see that it's inverted, and we tend to want to talk quite a bit about the background. Who has done similar studies, what research questions we're building on, what body of work has gone before, how this is justifying what we're doing now, and so forth. So there's a lot of background that we tend to want to talk about. And then we'll have supporting details, talking about that will touch on our methodology, our approaches, what GIS data sets we've used, what GIS analysis models, and so forth. And then finally narrowing down to the bottom, which is the result. And the result could be as simple as a map. It could be as simple as a number, a spatial statistic, but we certainly don't spend as much time talking about the result as we do oftentimes about the background. If we go to another audience, and I have here policymakers in this slide, their communication mode is inverted. They want to start with a pyramid where you're looking at the small part first. Give me the result. Give me the map. Give me the number. Give me the meaning right off the bat. I don't really want to, or I don't have time to listen to or to understand or move through all of the background. I need a result so that I can make a decision. That decision needs to be for the public good. And then there may be time, hopefully, especially in concert with staff, the staff of a policymaker, the so what factor in terms of the information that has led to the result and why. and then underneath that, the supporting information. So I've given you this diagram to show how we are a natural form of communication as GI scientists, as other kinds of scientists, as resource managers may be inverted from an important audience that we want to talk to in government, in public policy, and oftentimes in the media and in the public as well. Well, what can we do to solve this situation? There are many kinds of methods that we can use, and happily these are tried and true and have been established from organizations such as Compass and the Leopold program that I talked about before. One procedure or one tip that I'd like to share is just the simple idea of the message box. The message box is where you can take many ideas, a very complex study, something that you've been working on for a long time, something that is very important though, that you understand how what you have achieved or what you are finding should really be communicated to policymakers, that the information needs to get out there beyond your immediate audience. We'll talk later about how this can be spatialized with maps, but I want to start off just with this basic text example. So here you're looking at a message box, and within this box you are going to distill your study or what you have worked on into these basic sectors that you're seeing on the screen. As we do with many other things, we want to talk or we want to think about our audience first. Is this message box going to be focused on a policymaker, your congressman, somebody on your city council, and so forth? Is it going to be a journalist? Is the audience going to be the general public? In the middle of the box is your issue, the main nugget that you have worked on, that your ideas and your work have focused on. At the top is the problem, the specific problem within the issue that you're trying to solve, and then going around clockwise, the so what factor, why this is important. Actually, I don't want to go clockwise. Let's look at the so what factor. On the other side of the so what factor are the benefits of solving this problem, why this is important that it be solved, and what will result, again, in terms of the public good. And then at the bottom is a summary of the actual solution that you're proposing. So the message box is something that's very, as you can see, it's very simple. It can be a fairly straightforward process to take what you've done and to put into the message box. It's a wonderful exercise to use in the classroom or in workshops. And I can share with you via email later a one-page handout that describes how you can use the message box. But let's see it in action. So this slide shows you a basic scientific paper. This is a very important journal article that came out in Nature, and many of us know that Nature is one of the high-impact scientific journals in the world. This is a study, and you can see by the title, it's talking about the impact of regional climate change on human health. It was done by multiple authors. You're seeing the basic format of this scientific paper. It's about 7 to 10 pages long. Jonathan Patz and his colleagues at the University of Wisconsin did this study. The abstract is there, and all of the basic components of a scientific paper are there. But try giving this paper to, again, someone on your city council or a congressman or a journalist, and the eyes will glaze over and they will miss the point of, in this case, this very, very important study. The authors went through the message box example because they believe that their study really has some important messages beyond just getting it published in a scholarly journal. So let's look at the message box that they put together as an example. So the issue that is at the heart of their paper is this: that climate change is triggering disease epidemics. Climate change is triggering disease epidemics. So that is the main issue. The audience for this particular version of their message box went out to policymakers. So policymakers is the audience. Their problem statement: a warmer world is a sicker world. And further, warming allows diseases to spread further, to develop faster, and to become more severe. The so what factor in this, in case the problem statement doesn't scare you to death right then and there, this is one of the most significant impacts of global warming. But we paid very little attention to this. You don't often hear about disease epidemics, or at least at this time when this paper was published in 2005, you didn't hear as much about this connection between global warming and disease epidemics. And further, we are not prepared for the future. The benefits: being able to predict and to prevent disease outbreaks. And in recent months, we've heard about disease outbreaks in China with deadly viruses and so forth. We also want to lessen the impact of future epidemics. And the solution that they pose in their paper, they have both long-term and short-term solutions that they talk about in terms of preparing lines of defense, in terms of research and disease protocols, and in reducing emissions and monitoring that. So a very strong and clear message to policymakers. So this is an example of a very effective message box that was picked up also in the media as well, but it was a really clear and good message that policymakers could then take and try to implement. Here's another message box that has more of a GIS focus. I'm not going to go through all of the different components of this message box, but it's one that my colleagues and I are using now, aimed toward journalists, specifically a journalist for Science and Policy magazine. And the idea here is saving the whales as a theme using a GeneGIS package, GIS toolbox, a series of tasks that actually helps to understand the migration and the habitats of whales through specific DNA profiling and the spatial analysis of that kind of data. So again, I can provide you with a one-page handout that talks about how to use and create a message box, and I can give you a template. But I think that this is very, very effective. So moving from the message box to something that is more in our wheelhouse, so to speak, in terms of GI science or GIS. The idea here, with our GI science, where can we go in terms of our GIS maps, our GIS tools? And again, the idea here is that we don't want our geo tools to be siloed into just our normal work tools. We hopefully want our geo tools to be powerful communication tools, and they are that. But again, the focus that I'm trying to bring to bear here is these other audiences that can look at our data, look at our maps from our geo tools, and be inspired to act accordingly or to understand issues accordingly. So one of the things that is, I think, one of the most effective in terms of a geo communication tool is the story map. And so I'm going to talk for the next few minutes about communicating with story maps. And I'll show you several examples. And all of these, just about all of these examples, have downloadable templates that you can use to either recreate that particular story map, but more importantly, that you can use with your own GIS data. So again, the focus of my talk is very, very practical here to give you some ideas, to engender some discussion, hopefully, as you move through your meeting, and to check out some of these actual examples. So story maps are fantastic. People, again, everyone loves a story, and even policymakers like a good story. People are moved by emotion. The best way to emotionally connect with other people and to connect people to our agenda can be with the simple once upon a time. So let's take a look at some story maps. This is a story map that when it was released, and this is a story map that was created by the European Environment Agency in collaboration with Esri. It focuses on the outlook for European cities in terms of higher temperatures and heat waves, particularly in urban areas, and what are going to be the consequences of European cities getting warmer in coming decades due to global climate change. When this map was first released on the web, it received more than 100,000 views within the first 24 hours. And among those many views were policymakers who were very, very interested in the risks of heat waves and how vulnerable communities are going to be affected, what kinds of services they're going to need as a result. So in this story map, the basic story is in the various tabs that allow you to move through different time periods. Of course, the map interface itself, which is showing you what the projections are for temperatures throughout most of Europe. And so you're looking at various temperature scenarios that were calculated from numerical models based on various data sources. But the important thing in terms of the story is looking at the legend of the map, going through the various tabs showing the different time periods, and then also being able to understand these data in the context of the population, the characteristics of the population in the area. So now I've gone to the next slide, which shows some of these population data sets that are overlaid on the temperature projections. And as you click on any one of those points, you get a pop-up that shows the percentage of the population in that area that is 65 years of age or older. So basically this is showing you where the seniors in your community, where they are in terms of these areas that are of high heat risk. And again, for a policymaker, this hopefully sends a very clear message in terms of being prepared to service these vulnerable populations. Now, the idea of a story map, this was based on very complex geographic data, derived oftentimes from numerical models. But the idea of taking the complex geographic data and the GIS analysis that went into it and putting it into a cartographically rich, cartographically beautiful, communicative story map, I think can be extremely powerful. Esri has, this is an Esri story map, so you're looking at the URL as well, storymap.esri.com, where you can see this and many other story maps and download templates accordingly. And there are many other efforts that are going on with other groups, even other technologies that allow you to create these wonderful kinds of stories. Here's another example. This is based on a collaboration between the NOAA Coastal Services Center, working with, again with Esri, but also with the Great Lakes Resilience Alliance. And what they are describing here is a story in terms of what are the different land use scenarios in this portion of the Great Lakes. And I've chosen the Great Lakes to sort of straddle our audiences here from Canada and the United States, as well as other folks who are around the world. But given the location of your conference, this, I hope, is communicating very well. At any rate, the idea here, this story map with its panels is tailored to Great Lakes communities, and it's designed to help coastal planners communicate the benefits of coastal habitats, and also to take a look at the community resilience values of wetlands, of floodplains, and riparian restoration, as depicted in these maps and their critical messages. So again, a very powerful message for our decision makers. Another example is, this comes from the University of Wisconsin, the work of Janet Silbernagel and her David Hart and their colleagues at the University of Wisconsin, working in conjunction with our Esri Applications Prototype Lab. And this is a powerful, and this work is actually going to be shown at the Esri User Conference in the coming weeks. And the idea here is of spatial narratives. So exploring the places that you want to foster citizen engagement about, increasing the spatial literacy of these places through these stories. These stories can be told in terms of the geo-tools that we're talking about, including story maps. And in the case of these managers, these colleagues here, they're also working with mobile applications as well to engage people living in these communities to tell their own stories and to collect their own data, and then to make those data available in terms of an interface such as this one here, where you're looking at a story about the Green Bay region and the various kinds of observations that citizens will be able to contribute. This is a prototype, again, from the University of Wisconsin, in terms of journals, photos, audio, and video, and various kinds of stories that are in this pull-down menu that are depicted in these various story maps. There's another site that these colleagues have developed, and you can reach this at stlouisriverestuary.org, telling the stories and the science behind them, again, for this particular region. And this uses very rich data that are authoritative geographic data layers, but also coupled with, again, the observations, the photos, the data points that citizens have collected, even with the idea of what they call a deep map, which allows you to dig even deeper into a place, uncovering its history, the arts, the ecology, the issues, and the people. And the idea here is you dive deep into the data as if it were a container of wisdom with no bottom. So as you can see in this particular map, there are many, many data layers to explore. And on the one side of the map interface, there is yet another rich panel, a panel that's rich with information that comes alive when you click on a particular item on the map that gives you associated photos, videos, and text information. So I think these are all, could go on and on with these examples. There's so many that are being developed in coastal regions and ocean regions all around the world. There are other initiatives ongoing. I've been talking about story maps, but there is a company called Map Story that seeks to do something similar, particularly with temporal data. So I'll stop with the examples now and just try to summarize with some suggestions, because one of the first things that you may be thinking of, well, this is all great, but I've already got so much to do. How do I find the time to do something like this? I do want to be able to make a difference, but where do I go from here? So I just wanted to pass along just a few ideas. And on this slide, it talks about 3 of them. First of all, identify your own reasons for engaging and who you want to engage with. Spend some time thinking about that, and also how you're going to manage the time, how you're going to invest the time. For a lot of us who are researchers, this involves involving our students, and our students can learn so much from this kind of a project. They can do a lot of the work along with us. So this can be very, very advantageous. Related to that is picking outreach opportunities that do advance your research. For some people, especially for those who are working in the social science, physical science interface, these kinds of activities where you need to survey people, you need to get feedback. It's a natural for combining these kinds of communication activities with what you're already working on in your research. Twitter and blogs can work wonders in terms of getting out the message of what you're doing. You can embed story maps, of course, in blogs. You can tweet to these various resources. Again, I'm preaching to the choir with so many of you because so many of us are now active in social media and seeing the value of it. And one of the things that can be really helpful is to think about some of the social media tools that are out there. Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and so forth are great. But there is another cadre of tools that builds on that, one of which is Storyfy. So this slide doesn't really show you that much in terms of the entire story, but you can basically put together a story made up of tweets, relevant tweets that you have chosen and that you can put together in a package so that somebody can get the idea of an event or of an issue just from these tweets, from the videos and the photographs that have been linked to or embedded in the tweets. Someone has talked about Storyfy, where you can go to storyfy.com. It's a cool visual way to tell social media stories using your own or other people's tweets, as well as Facebook updates, pictures, social media breadcrumbs, and so forth. It's also a neat way to show how a story is developing over time as people are tweeting or posting things about the event. So storyfy.com is really great. Some other suggestions, if you have outreach administration, and for a lot of us who work at universities, there are advancement offices who are there to help you to communicate with policymakers, with the media, with the general public. And so making use of those resources at your own university, at your own organization, can really, really help you instead of you trying to go through that on your own. One of the things that is interesting but also daunting about this, though, and this is the warning that I have on the slide, is that this kind of engagement often requires interdisciplinarity, which is still difficult in academia. It's still a challenge in many facets of our professional practice. And one of the things that we are finding now is physical geographers or physical GIS people working with social scientists, more of the human geographers. For me, that's been a great joy, but I know many find that to be daunting. There are differences culturally and linguistically and so forth, but I hope that won't deter us from moving forward. And finally, a really big suggestion is to use not only the outreach resources that are in your own your own campus, your own organization, but there are bridge organizations that have been developed just for the purposes of helping scientists to communicate with policymakers, for instance. And so this next slide talks about, I think, one of the best ones out there, which is COMPASS. COMPASS used to be an acronym for Communication Partnerships for Science and the Sea, but has become so effective. It was so effective in helping ocean scientists that other scientific disciplines have asked for help. So COMPASS has dropped the acronym, and it exists for all of the various kinds of sciences. Right now there's quite a focus on the biological sciences, ecology, forestry, and so forth. Just any scientific group or individual who wants to communicate effectively with policymakers. This was an organization that was founded by Jane Lubchenco, who is the current outgoing administrator of NOAA, and her colleagues, Nancy Barron and many others. I would really encourage you to go to compassonline.org. They have a wealth of resources, templates. There are workshops that you can have them come and give at your organization or your campus. And their blog is really wonderful. So if you go to compassonline.org, be sure to check out the blog portion of their website. This slide talks about the fallacy of time. Again, I've got so many things that I have to do. I'm multitasking. I don't have time to do many or any of these things. Just wanted to pass on the result of a study entitled Scientists Who Engage with Society Actually Perform Better Academically. And these scholars found that so-called dissemination active scientists actually have higher publication values. I think a good publication rates, compelling them to open up their horizons also and to discuss with people having other points of view. This has actually helped them to improve their research. For many, it has helped them to increase the frequency of their publications. So this slide speaks to the academics in the audience. It can actually turn out to be a very positive and productive process. For me, I think about the example of when I was in school and I was involved in several different sports. So trying to go to class, but also trying to do well in the basketball team and the track team. And I noticed that in being an athlete as a college student, my GPA actually went up. And that was because I had learned to manage my time accordingly. One final quote, and this is from Mike Byrne, who is the current Geographic Information Officer of the Federal Communications Commission in the United States. We don't want geospatial data to be an afterthought. If you're not engaged in policy discussions, you're actually missing the boat, or we as a community are missing the boat. In trying to solve policy problems, geography can be used as an actual policy driver. And this is circling back to some of the things that I was trying to communicate at the beginning of this talk in terms of what we do, the science, the resource management, the geospatial tools and approaches. These underlie, or these are part of solving so many societal problems, long-standing societal problems, that we need to make this available to, again, our policymakers. So I'll conclude with these 3 points in terms of telling a good story. And given the challenges that our planet faces, I hope that you as a community will ponder and discuss whether communicating with policymakers is something that can be pursued with some of these wonderful tools that we have. So I'm asking you to consider the potential of telling stories from your geographic data, from your maps, using these story maps, even tweets, message boxes, and some of the other devices that we've talked about. Consider the implications for education, for training, even for GIS certification. Is communicating with policymakers now an ethical issue? Something that we really, given the challenges, the problems that we face, should this be something that we pass on to our students, make sure that we pass on to our students, not only how to communicate our science, not only how to communicate with, in terms of resource management, but communicating, again, with policymakers. And finally, I'm asking us to just to step back and to think again, to consider the implications of the contribution that our coastal GIS, our coastal geotools can make to society. So thank you again for listening to my thoughts and allowing me to share some of these practical examples. And you see on the slide my email address, so please feel free to send me an email. You can also follow me on Twitter. So that address, that Twitter handle is there. And at the bottom of the slide are several URLs or web addresses that I hope are helpful to you. One is where you can go to the Story Maps site at Esri to see the various story maps that we have developed in collaboration with partners. But there are many, many other story maps that are being developed all over the world. But at storymaps.esri.com, you can download the templates to make it very easy for you to develop your own maps. The next URL takes you again to Compass, that bridge organization that I talked about. The Leopold Leadership Program at Stanford is also a very interesting and powerful program. It actually focuses on bringing in a cohort of scientists every year to give them intensive training in communicating science to policymakers, the media, and the public. But even if you are not involved in that intensive training program, they still have a lot of resources on their site. Adapting Nature is a wonderful blog that's written by Professor Jessica Hellman at Notre Dame. And then finally, the Esri URL there is a link to a blog that I've written about this issue. And at the bottom of the blog, you can discuss this with me further if you want to. And so you can post comments there, and I'll be sure to respond to your comments, given that I'm delivering this talk to you virtually. So thank you very much, and have a terrific conference.